Attention, please, for a couple of minutes. We'll get started. So thanks for joining us this morning. We're happy to have you here for Alumni and Family Weekend. My name's Joe Carr. I'm a member of the class of 1983, and I work here at PC as the college's Associate Vice President for Marketing and Communications. More to the point, in the early 80s, I was a sports director at WDOM. And our three panelists were all good friends of mine. In fact, we have long-term relationships, all of us, which all started at WDOM, very much to the point today. So we'll be talking about that this morning. We hope this will be interactive. If something pops into your mind you'd like to ask one of the panelists about, or an observation you'd like to make, or something you might like to share about your own experiences, perhaps at WDOM or at PC as a student, or in any other capacity, just say so. We'll bring you in. We plan to wrap up close to 10 minutes of 11 because we know several folks are interested in jumping on a bus to get downtown for the basketball game. So thanks again for being here. Let me introduce Leanne Bish. Leanne is a sophomore at PC. I'm sorry, Junior. At PC is a senior. We're getting there. So, at PC and
details.
Thomas is a sophomore. We'll talk about him a little bit more in a minute. One of the DOM staffers here. But Leanne is a computer science major from Connecticut, and she, like Marty Moran many years ago, is the general manager of WDOM. So thanks for being here, Leanne.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about what you think we have in mind.
So we're going to be talking with the panelists about how WDOM shaped their careers and helped them in communications. I know PC doesn't offer a specific communications major, but your opportunity to be on air and learn a lot about how the communication world works has aided them in finding their career path.
So a little bit about our panelists, then we'll start talking with them. John Hennessy, to my immediate left here, class of 1982, sports play-by-play announcer specializing in hockey. He spent 6 years as the voice of the New Jersey Devils, including during their Stanley Cup season of 2003. Get the ring on? There it is. Providence College legend Lou Lamoriello was the person who put that team together and was John's boss at that time. And John also spent 9 seasons with the AHL's Albany River Rats, 6 seasons as the voice of the UMass Amherst hockey team in Hockey East, plus a year calling Friar games on radio and a year doing the same for Northeastern. His television work includes hosting duties on NHL Fox Faceoff and Rensselaer hockey, and he covered sports for WKOX in Framingham and WBZ in Boston, and he was the play-by-play announcer for the Albany Firebirds in the Arena Football League in 1996.
That was a trip.
Marty Moran, my classmate, voiceover artist. Marty Moran, voiceover since 1999. Former radio personality at WKPE in Cape Cod, his native Cape Cod, WXKS in Boston, WKSS in Hartford, WHCN in Hartford. He's done hundreds of spots. When you hear his voice, you may recognize it. You will, in fact, I'm sure. Clients include Lego, Uber, Denny's, Boston Museum of Science, Hasbro, and San Pellegrino. Television spots, sometimes it's on camera. Those clients include CarMax, so Connecticut Office of Tourism and Plainridge Park Casino. Tori Ryden, class of 86, is the host of Positively Maine on WGAN Radio in Portland, Maine, a great Maine radio station. That program highlights positive, inspiring stories about Maine people and things going on in Maine. Tori's busy. She does a lot of things. She's also the communication coordinator at Maine Public, which is public television, radio, and digital throughout the state of Maine. She's the CEO of Tori Ryden Communications. She was the host of Real Lives, Real Women, a web-based television program for and about women. She's the former Senior Director of Marketing and Communications at St. Joseph College in Standish, Maine, and former news anchor at WMTW and WCHS, both in Portland, and before that, a news anchor and reporter in Boston at Fox 25 and WBZ. So a real breadth of experience, and in each case, it all started at WDOM in the basement of Joseph Hall. Want to start the questions, Leanne?
Oh, sure. So how do you think Providence College, your experience here, has helped you in finding your career path and work in your work with communications?
Sure. I think for me it was just getting a well-rounded, balanced education. And gosh, I think you guys misspoke earlier. I majored in at WDOM. That was my major. and Brad's, yeah. The diploma, it says business, but I really received a great education here at Providence College, and you don't necessarily need to go to a communication school to excel in the broadcasting world. Hence look at us, and there's so many other people. Look at Sean McAdam, who's doing great work up in Boston, and a lot of print guys. Sean and Chris Duffy, who's up in New Hampshire. But I think it was the well-balanced education that did it for me.
Thank you. I think I'd have to actually concur with that. I was an English and French major here, and I have to say that I still rely on all of those hours of studying for Western Civ classes when you're playing Trivial Pursuit games. But also, somebody will say, oh, does anybody have any information on that? And I'll say, well, as a matter of fact, that was during the Ottoman Empire. And, you start drilling down, you're going, wow, how do I, you kind of lock onto this information that you studied so hard for here at Providence. I loved it here, and I think that one of the great things is this college taught me, and I don't want to speak for you guys, but I think it really taught me to be very scrappy. And, again, I got jobs as a result because I was not a communications major. Because I was an English major, my first hire at a radio station, the guy looked at me and goes, oh, you're an English major, you know how to write. Let me hear your voice. And I did my voice because I had worked at WDOM, and he said, oh, you got the job, just like that. And so it was because of that I was able to work in radio and then just kind of build my career from there. But I think a lot of it is just being scrappy, and I think I learned a lot about being scrappy right here at Providence.
And I would agree with both Tori and John. My feeling is that the education, for me, helped me to be, I think, a more critical thinker, a better writer, and also more open to integrating new information. So as I went on in life, as I needed it, it was not a big deal. You didn't think twice about looking for what you needed. And all of that. And I would say, too, being exposed to so many different things, in addition to development of Western civilization, which exposed us to all kinds of things that you wouldn't normally be exposed to, I don't think. I majored in psychology, minored in music, but I took economics, I took statistics, jazz appreciation with JJ Swoboda. Remember JJ?
Swoboda.
Hey man, hey, now here we go. Anyway, but he was great, so it was like world-class people teaching this stuff. So yeah, I think it's just a well-rounded education actually makes you a more well-rounded person and, actually a better employee.
Yeah, Martin, keep the mic for a second, too, but I'd like to ask you to describe, and for many of us, remind us of how WDOM was set up, where it was in the early 80s, what that facility was like, and what kind of programming we had.
It smelled.
Then I'll ask Leanne to contrast that.
Yeah, well, it was in a basement, so who knows what was going on down there that way. But it was in the basement of Joseph Hall. And we had a number of rooms in there. I recall there was the air studio, there was a news room, there was a production room, which could also be a newsroom, a news area, music library that was full of these things they were on vinyl, they're called records, and it was all inside there. And there was sort of a center area and then an office area. And that was sort of the setup. And it was all analog, obviously. But it was pretty cool. We tried to run it like a real radio station. So we had actual programming. It was block programming, but there would be times of the day that was the rock programming, and then we had jazz programming, and then classical programming. I think that during the week we did 4 hours a day of classical. Most of it was rock, and we purposely made it so that the rock programming, we weren't playing classic rock, we weren't playing pop. We purposely were trying to promote new bands, local bands, a lot of stuff that, you'd never hear of. But then again, there was other bands for instance, U2, nobody was playing U2, and we played the first U2 song, I Will Follow. And I'll bet you we broke that in Connecticut. Patrick Harrington believes he broke Duran Duran in Rhode Island. So, yeah, and we tried to make it as professional as we could, and yet give everybody the freedom to be creative and pursue what interested them, and just try to learn something and have some fun. And that's really what it was.
Let's ask Leanne to contrast that with what the operation is like today and where it is.
Yeah, so today we're not in a basement, which is nice. We're here in Slavin. We have a good amount of room at the station. We have streaming up, so you can listen to it on your phone or on the website. We also have, of course, the regular radio and a new Mac, so we can have iTunes, and we have 2 2-hour programs, which our DJs play whatever music that they like, and also the required ads and PSAs that we're given and emailed. We have had some artists come up from Providence area and around emailing me and some others about wanting to do interviews, so we're hoping to be able to connect with them. And I guess we don't do the block of specific types of music anymore. We just get everyone's applications and see what kind of music they enjoy playing, and we just set their schedules up based on their classes and their other extracurriculars. But our talk shows are also really interesting this semester, because we do have one show who talks to the friars and asks them about what their life is like, and because you see them around campus and you don't know quite exactly who they are if you're not from a Catholic background. So I thought that was very unique.
Yes.
And you have a show,
Yeah.
Broadway music, right?
Yes, Broadway Basics.
Is that a choice of yours?
Yeah, so I love going to New York and seeing shows, and I have a very unique last name, so I'm Basic Bish, and it's the Broadway Basics.
I like it.
So I just love playing whatever I can sing along to, old musicals, new, anything that just came out on Broadway, Tony Award winners, all kinds of stuff.
Can I ask another question? Because of your interest in that, you like to sing along. So when you were in high school, did you go through high school musicals? Did you sing? Did you perform?
Not really. I was in the choir, and then I ended up in like the advanced choir later on, but otherwise I really didn't do many musicals or productions with our school. We were an all-girls school, so it was kind of a big commitment, since we didn't have, we had to recruit boys from other schools around the area, and we'd have to wait for them to show up. So it was a lot of a waiting game, and I just was very focused on my schoolwork because it was a rigorous academic.
One thing about this experience, I think, for all of us, is that it caused us to encounter some real interesting characters. And you've already heard a couple of names dropped: Patrick Harrington for one, Sean McAdam for another one, and I think we'll probably all drift back in to that to some extent. And there's something there, I think, and maybe Tori, you can comment on this. The place was just fun. I mean, we learned a lot. We had a lot of fun. We made friendships that last to this day. I mean, so, like, I think probably any student organization, it was really great in that way. It was just a positive and uplifting place. Everybody wanted to be there all the time.
Oh, absolutely. And we didn't know what we were doing, which was perfect. The thing I want to say is that I think that because of the experience here, we see one another. And Joe was up at the University of Maine, so I'd see Joe up in Maine as well. But when you see one another and you know that you had the WDOM experience, it just goes, you're right back immediately. And similar with the business, I'd say. I think the four of us represent, we overlap some of the areas of the business. Marty does a lot more voiceover work and he's also really successful. I was going to say, unlike me, but no. I was going to say, that I think that in this business, there's so many shared experiences that it doesn't take much to kind of drill down and say, oh yeah, I understand. If you work in radio, you understand what people are going through. Same with TV. It's kind of this fraternity, and I imagine it's similar in other areas, like lawyers might feel the same way, and doctors. But it's very interesting just that we share that background, and just it doesn't take much for us. John and I had never met before, and immediately we know a lot of the same people, and you can I can tell we would be hanging out. So it's kind of interesting that way. What was your question?
Whatever it was, I'm sure you're right.
Blah, blah, blah. That's the other art that you learn. You just kind of keep talking on your feet until somebody takes the microphone away. Please take it away. Oh, is it John's turn now?
Sure.
You know, I have a funny story to share. I think I won an audition to get on, to be the play-by-play guy for men's hockey on WDOM. And before we did our first game, Ken Kreitzer and I, Ken is videotaping over there.
Wave your hand.
We went up, wave your hand, Ken, that's Ken. We went up to Merrimack without any equipment and sat in the last row of the bleachers. And that rink, Tom Lawler rink, is a cold rink if you remember. It's a really cold. And we pretended to do the game. It was do you remember that?
Very well.
That was in the fall of 1978. Wow.
Great idea.
Yeah, that's what we did. We practiced, and then we got our equipment together, and I guess the rest is history. But it was pretty rudimentary in those days, to say the least.
I have another question, I'm sorry, but
Okay.
I've always been fascinated by play-by-play and color. I don't know how you do it.
We cheat.
Well, I just listened.
We make a line chart. And so the same guys usually play together, and there's different positions. Right wingers tend to stay on the right side, so you list them all on the right side.
Okay.
Centers down the middle, left wingers down the left side, and then the D pairings. Now today, it's so easy to do because the sports information department puts out these unbelievably beautiful line charts for you with all the information, where they're from, if they've been drafted, all the stats. But still, I write them over anyhow because it helps me remember.
Just watching them go so quickly and having to keep up the pace with whatever's happening out on the court.
You can't always mention each player because it just gets, you have to almost generalize a little bit, you know. But when Ken and I were doing the games way back then, there were no printed line charts. I would have to go down before the game and ask the coach what his lines were. And some coaches were like, I can tell you what my lines are. We beat it. Yeah, like Lenny Siglarski up at BC he's a nice guy, but he would never tell me what his lines were. You know, and then Lou wanted to know when I got the other lines, he'd be like, give me their lines. A little bit of credibility, you know. But I thought that was a funny story, Ken and I going up to Merrimack.
Remember it well.
Yeah.
That's why Randy Wilson got hurt in the game.
There was a big brawl. I think it was an exhibition game.
It was an early season.
Yeah, they were not in Hockey East yet. I'm not even sure they were D1. But there was a big brawl, and Randy Wilson, who was one of the big stars, one of the Wilson brothers back in the 70s, he fell on the ice and somebody stepped on his hand. I remember that. So there was quite a bit of blood. Just a little bit of blood. Yeah.
But John, to your point, I can remember asking Bob Bellamore, the assistant coach, so many times before games, what are the lines? And he'd kind of sheepishly give them to me.
Yeah.
So we'd have some place to start, doing our own little chart.
That's right. Well, Ken taught me how to do that, the line charts. I had no idea how to start. Ken gets credit for that. But they used to track ice time of the players, and they had this big bulky machine. Do you remember that machine, Joe? And so they had the lines on that, so I would be up in the press box, sneaking right with the lines. I wasn't giving them to anybody else. It was just for our own purposes. So I just thought I'd share that story. It was kind of, I thought, a funny, interesting story.
You were scrappy. Let's get back to scrappy.
That was scrappy.
Yeah.
Just like listening to a semester worth of Civ classes in 4 days. No. I had a roommate that did that. He never went. He just would go.
That's probably an ancient reference for some of the current students. All the Civ lectures used to be recorded.
Right, on
And
tape.
you go to the library listen to this later if you wanted to.
And he would get a B, and it used to really annoy me that he would, because I would work really hard to get a B, So.
This tradition of sports continues to this day. This young man standing over here to Ken's left is Thomas Zinzarella, who is currently the sports director at WDOM. And Thomas is doing all the right things to develop a career in play-by-play. He's landed himself a gig for this coming summer on the Cape with Cape Cod League Baseball, and he is the distant successor to John and me and several others as the current WDOM hockey play-by-play announcer. So it continues.
And he did Harwich last year, right, Thomas? Yeah. Because when he came in, that's right, and Marty's from Harwich.
Marty grew up there. White House Field.
Would go to games all the time at White House Field behind the high school, which they knocked down, but that's where the high school was. Yeah, cool.
This is such a
That's awesome.
typical PC thing, isn't it? It just keeps going around in circles.
But you know, those games, those players are really good players. Like, a lot of those guys are going to be, you know, you're going to see them, yeah, major league talent there. You know, they're just college kids, but they're so good. Yeah, it's great.
The Heisman Trophy winner played a couple of weeks ago.
Kyler Murray.
Yeah. He didn't play a lot, but he played a couple of weeks anyhow, right?
Like 12 games because he
Yeah.
had football training.
I remember
He was
seeing
the year
him.
before me, which, you know, sucks, but...
Because I have a house in Harwich. I go to games all the time. I love it.
We should have staged this in Harwich.
Let's go to Harwich.
Use it in Harwich, everyone.
We live in Orleans.
Small world.
So when we think about WDOM as an element of the PC student experience, I'm thinking of you in particular, Tori. I know you were involved in a lot of other things too. You're from Price School.
I was.
I recall some other things. So how did it sort of fit in that context from your perspective?
God,
Overall,
not well. No, I'm just kidding. I did a lot of stuff when I was here. And I think that I felt really inspired to get involved. My freshman year, I joined the Friars Club or whatever I gained admittance to, or whatever you want to say. And you all know what the Friars Club is. They give the tours and all of that.
The white jackets.
I'm sorry?
The white jacket.
The white jackets, the off-white, yes. At a reunion of mine, actually a couple of years ago, a classmate of mine showed up in her Friars jacket. I was shocked she still had it. Anyway, and I swam here for the one year. It was the first year that swimming became Big East, so I did that. And I was an RA as well. So I did a lot of things, but radio, I love radio. No matter what I've ever done, radio is my passion. It's always had my heart, and I just think there is something so intimate about radio. And I think that I've done television as well, and I think that with radio, it really compels you or requires you to develop a better way of describing things, and you have to really think well on your feet, and you're scriptless most of the time, and it's a really wonderful medium that prepares you for so many things. I think it just got me more comfortable with public speaking, because there you are, and you don't see anyone, and here's the microphone, and maybe nobody is out there, but all of a sudden you'll run into somebody out in the community and they'll say, I heard some show you did, or they'll have a detail, and all of a sudden, I remember being a student thinking, people are listening? Like, really? Somebody heard that? And it could have been fellow students. We were really lucky that we had, I don't know if students here listened to WDOM, but we had a lot of friends who listened to WDOM. I mean, would you support that, Marty?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and I think that just the location of where the antenna is, I assume it's still on top of McVinney?
Yeah.
That's like a pretty high point in Providence, so that helped. So you could get beyond campus with all of 125 watts. But it was yeah, it could definitly carry a bit.
I think it was 10 watts back in the day.
10 watts?
Wasn't it 10 watts back in the day?
Until the about 81.
Okay. No, we had it, no, you're right, 81. It became 125.
Michael Coleman and I were playing song together, water increase.
Now, we want to talk about Mike McCormick in a little while. We'll come to you for that. So.
Oh, Mike McCormick, read Mike McCormick stories.
Right.
All of you are in communications. How do you feel that communications has changed in terms of technology and like podcasts,
Bloody satellite.
YouTube, and all these new things changing the atmosphere?
I want to just say, I was actually hoping you'd ask that question because I want to speak to something that might help students who are looking to get into kind of the broadcasting business. It's changed so much that you're going to have, obviously you have your YouTube stars who might just be telling people how to do their eye makeup, and they have 1 million followers, and they're monetizing things, their podcasts and all that. It's so important, especially now that the kind of competition as far as a lot of people wanting to get into the communications field on TV, radio, and all of that. And then also you have all of the competition of people who are doing their own thing, like the YouTube stars and all of that, that it's so important. The number one thing to really concentrate on when you're in school is to become a really good writer. Writing is king. Writing is where it's at. And writing helps you become a better speaker. And so when you work on, Marty had mentioned being here and that the classes really demanded that he work on his writing. And I can't speak strongly enough about that is the key to communication. And if you're a good writer, you'll get a job anywhere. And then you'll get in and you'll wow them with your writing, and then you'll move up and you'll move up. Writing takes you everywhere. And I think that has been my case. It's just really, when you can write, and then you're a fast writer and you can quickly get this together, and then you're on the set and you're at the microphone, and it just really, it gets your own thoughts together more quickly. And it allows you just to be a very effective communicator.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And some of the ways that I've seen over the years the radio business change. It changed, first of all, with the technology. The paradigm shifted from all analog to digital. We take it so for granted that there are computers running basically everything. All the music is on servers and you can automate any show. That didn't exist, really. The only automation systems were those clunky 4 reel-to-reel machines and the 2 things with the cards, and had a really rudimentary computer that never worked. And so you could tell which stations were automated because you'd be listening in the morning, and in the afternoon you'd hear, you'd be listening in the morning, you'd hear, the good afternoon, the weather for the Cape and Islands. It was everything was always off. But so technologically, it's definitely changed. Competition-wise, it changed. Radio used to just be, competing with each other, different radio stations, and that's about it. And I can recall being in a meeting where, and this is right after 1996, when big companies were buying up stations in markets and stuff. And what they were basically trying to do was corner the market, which made sense at that time. And I remember one guy, when they announced one of their acquisitions, he said, we're not going to have any competition. The only competition we're going to have is if it comes from outer space. And sure enough, then came Sirius XM, came like the next year, And then they were forced to actually run ads for XM. I remember them. I was like, what are you doing? You're like giving away, well, whatever. So competition changed. And then the business itself changed quite a bit. In 1996, the Telecommunications Act of 1996 was enacted. Before that, there were limits on how many outlets, how many stations one company could own in any market. Those basically got lifted. So these big groups formed, and they bought up all the stations. They consolidated. So there's not as much competition. There was, I would say, in the commercial radio world, there's more homogenization of the programming, of the formats. But they also brought a lot of professionalism to a lot of the stations. A lot of the stations were these little mom and pops, and some of them, I worked at one, they didn't have a budget for anything. You'd have to, if I needed reel-to-reel tape, I'd have to go buy it and then hope that they'd pay me back within like 120 days, And and I wasn't exactly Scrooge McDuck back then, nor am I now, but, the first station I ever worked at on Cape Cod, It was called Cape 104. It was a CHR, contemporary hit radio station. And it was owned by David Lee Roth's uncle. His uncle was a neurosurgeon in Boston. And he was just interested in the business, you know. So it changed, and it made it more professional in that way. So those are the main ways that I saw that they changed.
I don't want to be the mic hog here, but I'll say from a TV news perspective, what is required of a reporter, let's say you go in and I advise anybody who wants to go into TV news, please don't turn your nose up at going to, you know, Podunk, Indiana for a job.
Well, Bangor, Maine.
Bangor, Maine. Going to far-flung places is so good for you. It really challenges you as a person. So personally, you're there, you know nobody, you become friends with the other employees at work. You just, again, scrappy, and you kind of figure it out. You're not making much money, but you have opportunity to do just about everything at that station, which is fantastic, because you don't get an education like that. I mean, if you went to, some people will say, forget the smaller stations, don't go to Indiana, you can go right to Boston. You go right to Boston, and chances are, stand in line. You're going to be behind maybe 20 people, and it's going to take a while, and then you may get deflated and say, well, and not that grad school's a bad thing. I'm a proponent of it, but you might say, well, maybe I should just go to grad school and not stick around and wait. But if you go to a place that desperately needs you, you are going to be on the air, you're going to be getting great experiences right out the chute. Now, the difference from when I started as a reporter 1,000 years ago, when the Archaeopteryx were still flying around overhead. I went in and so I would set up a story, I would go out and report on the story. I had they're now called videographers, but we called them photogs at the time. They had a camera that weighed about 35 pounds. They had a deck that held the tape, huge tape, that the camera recorded to, and that weighed about 50 pounds. And then isn't that what we decided, 35, 50? That was about right. And then the sticks, is this what we decided? Or am I embellishing a little? Okay, it was like 300 pounds. So, but that was, you were a team, and you would go out together, and you would do a story, you would go do the interview, you'd go back, you'd look through the video, you'd write it, you'd put everything together, you'd hand your script to your photog after you record it, and then they edit it for you. Now everything's different. You have one-man bands, and everybody's shooting on little cameras, and you got to do your own work. And so you go out, you set up your own story, you go out, you set up your tripod. If you're doing a stand-up, you've set it up, and you just hope when you do 3, 2, 1. And it's quite a buzz here at Providence College, here in McPhail Hall, where everybody is waiting around to see if they can get a job here. And if I've cut off my head, I have to redo it again. You know, it's like you have to kind of figure it out. Not only that, you're doing all of your own work, plus you're tweeting out, and there's competition to get your tweets out faster than anybody else, and good information. Well, sometimes people have jumped the gun and they have to go in and issue apologies. And then they also have to do, Facebook. They've got to do, everything. You have to kind of do all that stuff.
Why has everything fallen on you?
On a reporter.
On the reporter to do everything now?
So shall I keep going, or do you want to? Okay, so over time, and this is going to sound depressing. Don't be depressed, everyone, when I say this, but there was a time when in broadcasting the pie was this big. So let's say it's the size of this table. And that's how much money different stations had. They were kind of competing for airtime and ratings and all of that.
Budgetary.
So it's over time, it's now shrunk to about this size, from the table to this size. So because of that, what goes away? People.
Yep.
So then more is expected of individuals. And so it's no longer, there was a time when it was kind of a glamorous field. It is a lot of work. And what worries me is that shortcuts are taken because out of necessity. You can't stay at a meeting till the end because you've got to get back, because it's all on you to get it done. So does that help?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, John?
I think Marty summed up the radio business beautifully, and it's kind of unfortunate because I worked at those mom and pop stations, and that's where you really cut your teeth, And I remember one of my first jobs was at a little country western station in Waltham, Mass. I think it was WDLW, and I hate country music. You just have to take the jobs where they were, and one of my first jobs there was doing the ethnic programming on Sunday mornings. There was an Indian show, there was a Jewish program, there was all these, and one of the programs wasn't even in English, and I had to play the commercials. So the guy would, I'm not making fun of any languages here, but it'd be blah, 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 John, and that was my cue to play the commercial. And so, but that's where that's where, like I said, where we cut our teeth. And now with computers and satellite, those opportunities are pretty much gone. Maybe little stations up in Vermont, I'm not sure, but even there, I think they're satellite or on a computer server. So it's, in that regard, it's unfortunate. But there's still jobs out there, and don't turn your nose up at anything. Yes, Ken.
I'm just curious if you see what I see, which is that the jobs are shifting to institutions rather than media companies. Every company now has a broadcast department to manage their social media, to do their own podcasts, to do their own studio announcements. Do you see that, and is that really where the opportunity is for jobs?
Yes, I think that I'm going to go back to writing again as being the most important piece of anything that people can bring to a job. So it's writing, but it's also storytelling. And I think that everything is coming to that place of storytelling. So companies are now finding, well, how are they relevant? They're relevant if they've got a robust website. And what's a robust website? Well, you don't want to go to a website that doesn't have videos or audios, right? You want to be able to go in and kind of, especially if they're looking for, employees. I mean, let's look at the job. The job list rate right now is at an all-time low, right? People are dying to get good employees in, and so they need to be able to showcase their organization in a really good way to try to draw people in, but also to generate business. So I always tell people, be really open-minded, because storytelling takes on, you can be a storyteller at a radio station, at a TV station, at a newspaper. You can also be a really effective storyteller at an organization, at a nonprofit, at a for-profit, and in a town. You might work for a town council, and you can help them, find their story. So I think that's more relevant, in my opinion, what I'm seeing, that I would tell students, really look at storytelling as an important piece of moving ahead, because that's where it's at. Would you say, Marty?
I would totally agree. And one thing that I wanted to add is that there are certain things in the broadcasting business that really have not changed, and they do apply to other companies too, who need to communicate their message. And that is, if you want to get a job in broadcasting, I believe, and this is what I see, you have to be a self-starter. You have to be creative, you have to be enthusiastic, you have to be the kind of person that doesn't need to be told what to do all the time. Broadcast outlets tend to run lean personnel-wise. The boss has got so much to do, you go ahead and grab something and go for it. I think that separates you from a lot of other people. And if you add the writing ability to that, and the education to that, people are going to be, they're going to be impressed by you. They like that. They don't like people that need to be told. And I also wanted to mention too that what Tori said about starting in a small market. My niece is right now doing exactly what you said. She graduated from college. She went down to Birmingham, Alabama, and worked for a newspaper for 2 years. And now she's working at NBC Montana as a reporter. She's trying to, she's learning. You have to go to a smaller market to get the experience, to get good, so then you can get yourself into one of the top 20 markets or the top 10 market.
Malin,
I came a little bit late. Back when I got here in the late 70s, one of the things we had to do, and I don't even know if you guys had to do it because you're a couple of years behind me, but we pretty much pushed everybody on the station to get an FCC license in order to be able to touch the transit. I doubt that that's still going on.
Let's ask Leanne.
Yeah, so we don't really play with the transmitter. We have someone else deal with that for us. We just turn it off and on when we have breaks. So the technology aspect has definitely not been as hands-on as it seems like it used to be.
Yeah, I can remember we all climbed on a bus, everybody from WDOM, and we went up to the customs house in Boston to take our FCC test. Yeah, we had to have an FCC license, I remember, and we weren't allowed to touch the transmitter. Do you remember getting a license?
What class were you out, 81?
I did not get an FCC license.
I actually graduated on a half year because I was trying to get that.
I did. I had to.
Customs House in Boston. So,
We're discussing whether we got our FCC licenses over here. I'm not sure.
Sorry, you're not legit.
Shall I leave now?
I never transmitter you in trouble. Somebody, I think it was Marty, that talked about the antenna being up on top of McVinney. If you juice the transmitter, you wiped out WPRO. We had a better way. The station was only 10 watts then, so I would wipe them out on my shift from 9 to 2 on Sunday night. And to get to some other people in the city, because there were no urban stations in the area at that time. Brown was on 2 to 6, and we were 9 to 2. And WPRO would call and they would say, cut the S. And I would go, I don't know what you're talking about. You know what I'm talking about. We're not being heard in certain parts of the city. That was fun.
That's true. That's funny. I have a similar story. When I worked at WKOX in Framingham, I was a DJ from 8 to 10 o'clock. And when we went from 10,000 watts during the day to 1,000 at night. But I had to do it manually. There was no computer in those days to do. And I would forget all the time. And I would get and I would get a call from a station in New London, Connecticut saying, can you please turn your power down? And it would happen a couple of times a week. And I was, yeah, we had to do that manually. Well, I mean, it was only a button, but it was, I would just forget all the time. Get it.
John, another thing that's worth mentioning is PC, when you and I were here and had an incredible athletic department with Dave Gavitt and Lou Lamorello and John Tracy winning world titles in cross country and Helen Burton in women's athletics. They provided a lot of opportunities for us to cover major sports teams, playing major teams. We all remember the night Michigan came in, and North Carolina came in, and Louisville came in. Then the Big East started, all by people from Providence College, and we were able to cover a lot of those events.
Yeah, Mike Tranghese. He was the SID when I started here. He went on to be the commissioner.
John Marinado.
And John. That's right.
Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit about hockey for a couple of minutes here, just if you'll indulge this. The way that it worked in those days, John indicated that because he was so good, he was able to land the play-by-play gig for multiple years, but it changed after that. So John was a year ahead of me, and he did play-by-play when he was a senior, and I did what amounted to color. Next year, I got the play-by-play seat. Steve McDonald was behind me, and Steve, also known as Jim Shorts, is the radio voice of University of Rhode Island basketball and football now, and he's a morning sports radio guy. And there were others behind it. So this hockey thing has always been a piece of WDOM. I was fortunate enough to be able to be the voice of Maine hockey for about 25 years, and John, of course, had a storied career in professional sports, but there's something to this, and it's because exactly what Ken was talking about, that unique kind of opportunity, which was rare in those days for somebody like us, and that's why we got all those chances to try it and to make all these mistakes, which we sure did. But
Mrs. Burton did that same way on the women's side. She approached us in probably was 77, and she wanted to get the Lady Friar hoops on the air, and so she was able to do that. She started traveling with the team around the area to do broadcasts and dragging that equipment.
yeah, I'd like to say, by the way, a lifetime around people who supports play-by-play announcers, and especially hockey play-by-play announcers. John Hennessy, in many ways, is the most talented one I've ever seen. He works hard at it, but he makes it look easy. Because it's really, really good. It's kind of an amazing thing to see, and I think Ken would probably agree with that. And I'll never forget one night in 1981 when he was junior in the ECAC tournament. The Friars were playing at the Boston Garden against Clarkson in the ECAC semifinals, down by 2 goals with a minute to go. and they scored twice in the final minute to tie the game and won in overtime. And John is looking for this tape, and I sure hope he finds it because we're going to do a lot with it if we can find it, because his call of Steve Anderson's overtime game winner when he was 21 years old is amazing, and it's worth listening to. So all three of these folks are incredibly talented, which is why we asked them
So those
to be
tapes
here.
have not been found yet?
They might be in my basement.
Find them and next time you have,
Yeah,
play it.
I have a lot of tapes, and I've looked for it, and I think I have it somewhere because Lou Lamorello asked me for it about, I don't know, 10 years ago or something like that, and I was able to find it. But again, Joe, you're very kind, thank you. But yeah, I remember that very clearly. It's only a matter of time till the Friars get it.
Which was kind of a ridiculous thing to say, but you got away with it.
Got away with it, because they did score and win the game.
Just before the goals, John said it's only a matter of time until the Friars get it, which is, Thomas, a no-no. Don't do that.
No.
Because
What did I know? I didn't know any better.
The puck gets escaped, and it's a breakaway the other way.
I was just a kid on WDOM. What did I know?
More than you knew.
Personalities, we brushed up against this before. I'd like to throw in a couple of names and hear what people have to say about it. And Mal mentioned it before, but Mike McCormick was Marty, 2 general managers before Marty, class of '81. Now Father Mike McCormick, a Dominican priest, since graduating from PC, and a guy who gets credit, I think, for many of us for getting us started, at WDOM. Oh boy, broke the mold, didn't they, Marty?
Yeah, and I was trying to think, wasn't Mike general manager for 2 years, his junior and senior year? So yeah, he was...
Then Glenn Hoyle, then
Yeah, and then Glenn Hoyle, then me. Yeah, Mike was an interesting guy, and his younger brother, Pat, also went to PC. He was in our class, and I was friends with Pat. But yeah, we were talking about this story that I have of Mike McCormick. So Mike became a Dominican priest. So after he graduated, he went to seminary. And when I was general manager, I had some technical issue that we were trying to figure out regarding the hockey games. I can't remember what it was. And I was getting no help from the phone company or whatever. So I talked to Mike, and he helped me out and everything. So it was great, and I wanted to thank him. So I knew that Mike liked Dewar Scotch. So I bought a bottle of Scotch, Dewar Scotch, and I put it in a box all packed up, and I mailed it to him at the seminary. And actually, I still have this letter. I found it the other day. He sent me a letter back thanking me, and he said, no problem helping you out, and thank you so much for helping me out with my spiritual life. So I think he enjoyed the Scotch. So.
sound about right?
That's funny.
Sound like Mike to you? Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
You know, and Mike had a big hand in getting all the hockey games on the radio. It was my sophomore year, and Mike and I were going to have dinner at the Newport Creamery. And we walk in, and there's Lou Lamorello having his dinner. So when we waited till he was done, and Mike approached him and said, "This is the fall of '79, I guess. We like to do all the hockey games with your permission." And he was like, "Sure." And so I think that's the beginning of us doing all the hockey games. Because Ken, when you were an underclassman, you guys didn't do all the games, right? Or most of them?
Most of them.
You did do most of them?
Except for the Fly 2 road trips. Because Tom Foley was doing play-by-play when I got started, and he would go on the bus trips with the team. So they did probably 80% of the games.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
But then a professional station came in the fall of '78, '79, and started doing the games. So you made a breakthrough in being able to keep the college station doing the games as well.
We did all the hockey games back in the early 70s.
Yep.
Home and away. Home and
Oh,
away.
and away? Oh, that's great.
Come and gone.
Yeah.
So another guy, let's shift the time frame just a little bit later, but Marty, you referenced this when we did the podcast interview the other day. People with WDOM backgrounds have been successful in related areas such as advertising, and somebody who comes to mind there is Patrick Harrington.
Yes, Patrick Harrington was an art major and a cartoonist.
Great cartoonist.
Yeah, very good cartoonist. He had a strip in the Cowl every week, and of course, we used him for any graphic arts that we needed. And Pat went on to, I think that his first job in advertising was at Foot Cone and Belding in Chicago. I don't even know if they're still in business anymore. They might be, I don't know. Are they? Yeah. John Simpson was one of our DJs, and he went into advertising. Our own Adrian Lee, who was one of our great rock DJs at the station. Adrian's doing marketing communications in the pharmaceutical area. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna, you know, the skills can be applied to a variety of different things, I think. Yeah.
Tori, he's a fun guy, quite a character.
Who, Pat Harrington? Oh my gosh. A brilliant guy. What did you say?
He was a character himself.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he was definitely one of those great people. But I think that's part of, I think, the whole thing, that getting a background at WDOM and being here, and again, the writing and all of that, and being stretched, it really does set you up for a multitude of careers, and advertising one of them, marketing. And there are a lot of people who come out of PC who go into marketing and advertising. And I don't know, it's a great education for that. I just also want to give, Rick Pitino was the head coach for basketball when I was here, and Billy Donovan, who has skyrocketed, he was the year behind me, married a classmate of mine. A lot of great names that came out of this place. Downtown Donnie Brown, remember him? Yeah, so, and then the other thing I'll say, I was with you guys when you went to Grand Forks, North Dakota. It was my freshman year, and some friends of mine said, wouldn't it be great to go on a road trip by bus? Oh yeah, to Grand Forks, North Dakota, and it was a blast. And it was it called the Frozen Four? No, what was it called?
It's still called the Final Four.
It was the Final Four.
Don't you remember that?
It was a blast.
We were on the bus together.
We were.
Mary and Larry.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't.
We were in the back of the bus.
We were in the
bathroom, right?
We were like the only two women. I was like, what? I don't know a lot about hockey, but I'm going to learn real fast.
There was very few women on the bus.
It was very fun. Good to see you, by the way.
Good to see you too.
Oh, gosh,
That's a bus trip. I've been on some in minor league hockey. There's some bus trips, but Lord have mercy, that's a bus trip.
Father Bondi was with us too, remember?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Father Bondi is a big supporter.
And then 2 years later, I went to Detroit.
To Joe.
To Detroit, to Joe Louis Arena.
Wow, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think that's when we threw the fish. It was nationally televised. We were in the final game against RPI,
Octopus.
was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we threw the fish. We had to go. It was during Lent. We went down to Mass, and then after that, we went to the fish market and got the fish. The guys all got the fish, and they threw the fish. Nobody knew who it was.
Was it Friday?
Yeah, it was Friday.
That's funny.
Yeah.
What do you guys believe would be your most memorable experience in WDOM communication or client work?
For me personally, I was part of 2 championship teams. In 1995, the Albany team in the American Hockey League, and then in 2003, calling the New Jersey Devils Stanley Cup Championship. Those would be 2 of my highlights. And I always remember the Clarkson game too, Joe. That's certainly a highlight.
Wow, I mean, I've got nothing. You got it. I don't have that. I dabbled a lot, so I knew nothing about classical music, but suddenly I had a classical music show, so it was kind of crash course in classical music. It's really funny. I think about, there was this one opportunity I had to develop a show. It was a public affairs show that I did, and it was on. My brother at the time was in the Peace Corps in Sierra Leone, and so I had always had this bleeding heart for volunteerism. And after leaving here, I was in the Jesuit Volunteer Corps in Montana on an Indian reservation. So I did, volunteer work after college. So I was always kind of wanting to do a show on that. So I did, and it ended up being something that was really near and dear to my heart. It was kind of an homage to my brother. But I got stopped by several friends who said that they were inspired by it to go into the Peace Corps. So I guess that was a pretty cool point for me. I felt like, wow, this is really neat, and this is very powerful. Like, it's almost like Edward R. Murrow said, this instrument can teach, it can inspire, it can only do so through the means it's better than I'm saying it. I'm butchering it right now. But it basically says, I mean, it can really reach a lot of people, but it depends on you, the individual, to keep it in the spirit that it was developed. So I felt immediately that connection.
One of the highlights at DOM, well, there's a couple of them, there's a lot of them, but we would also have public affairs programming Monday through Thursday. And for one of the shows, we asked Mayor Vincent Cianci, Buddy Cianci, to come in. And he said, yeah. And he came in, and I gotta tell you something, he was nothing but nice. He was funny, he was personable, he sat there in his interview. I can't remember who did the interview with him, but he was great. And I know, you know, Buddy had his issues and everything, but I always liked the guy, just something about him. So that was kind of cool. In my radio career, a couple of highlights that I remember is I had the opportunity to introduce my favorite band at Hartford Civic Center and at Lake Compounds, which was an outdoor amphitheater, and that was pretty cool.
What band?
The Beach Boys, of course, the mighty Beach Boys, of course. And in when I became a voiceover artist, and actually I was still working in radio and I was part-time pursuing voiceover work, and I got hired to do a commercial, to voice a commercial. It was one word. But it was for Nick at Night, and they were going to be promoting a Happy Days marathon. If you remember Happy Days with the Fonz. So they needed for their promo the sound of Fonzie going, "Ay!" But they couldn't lift it from the show because there's a laugh track on the show, and so there's laughter behind it. So I got hired to do one word, and when my agent sent me the check was more than what I made in 2 weeks in my radio job. So I was like, for one word? I was like, I think I know which direction I better go in. So that's sort of some things I remember.
And I just wanted to say one thing. In my career, I've had the opportunity to interview a lot of people, just in TV and all that stuff. And one night, I was able to interview B.B. King and Ray Charles, all in one night. That was a pretty good night. So I guess I'd say that. Do you guys even know who Ray Charles and B.B. King are? Yeah, everybody does? All right. Outstanding. B.B. King became a friend of mine after that, and so I loved it.
All right, well, we're out of time. We're way out. So thank our panelists, please. Tune in WDOM, listen to Leanne and Thomas and the others there. They're doing a great job, and it's really come a long, long way over time. But in many ways, still the same as it was. So.
And Joe, thank you very much. Leanne, Patrick, thank you all for coming. Thank you.
So let's get downtown and go Friars, right? Go Friars. Thank you.
Friars.